So today we are here with Zeona McIntyre. Oh my goodness, the queen, I shall say, of midterm rentals. And we are going to have such a fun conversation, not only talking about midterm rentals and short-term rentals, but real estate agents and creative financing. OMG, we have a lot in store. Zeona, thank you so much for being with us.
You're welcome. I'm excited.
So first, before we dive in, let's just have you walk us through a little bit about who you are and where you're located in the world.
Yeah, well, I'm in Boulder, Colorado. That's the easy question. Who I am, I have had so many iterations in real estate. I'm lucky to have been in an investor spot since 2014. So it's a long horizon. And through that, I've gotten to do arbitrage. I've done co-hosting, short-term rentals, midterm rentals, became an agent. I mean, I feel like I've had all of the roles. So now I'm diving into syndications, creative finance. So we can really talk about anything you want to talk about.
How long is this podcast interview going to be? No, I'm kidding. No, and I love that you mentioned the word iterations. And this is a little bit off topic, but I think it's a really important thing to point out is that we are constantly evolving as business owners, as investors, as drivers of our futures. And a lot of people look at making pivots or iterations to their businesses as a bad thing. And I have a feeling you're just like me, where I think it's a very strategic, smart thing to continue to evolve in your business.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, when you have made those shifts and expanded your horizons, have you ever looked back and thought, oh man, I wish I never did that, or that was a mistake? Or how has that transformation process played out for you?
Yeah, I think that I get bored and I need to be challenged. And so I can't just sit and do the same thing and be like, cool, I'm in my zone of genius and I'm done. But it's like I need to keep growing and learning, absorbing, reading. So that's just the way that my mind works. And so I get excited about something and then there's nothing I could do to stop doing it. Right? It's like everything is pulling me in that direction. So I don't even think I had a choice. But sometimes I do think I make my life harder, where I'm like, oh man, you could just do the same old thing every single day and have it perfected. And it's not that way. I'm very often on the edge and having to be courageous, like scared or unsure or, taking risks. So that's just the life that I have.
That you have. And I'm curious, for those times where you feel like you're on the edge or maybe scared, how do you deal with that emotionally?
Well, I have a great partner who supports me. I always have crazy ideas. I tell him, I've got another crazy idea. You ready? So he is a good sport. And he's also a really good balance for me because he is a lot more risk adverse. And so sometimes I feel like he's bursting my bubble, but also he just helps me to slow down and listen and kind of see some other angles, because I can get just my blinders up and I'm like full steam ahead on this thing. But I do spend a lot of time being fearful and then just overcoming. And I think a lot of time people from the outside see us and think, oh, well, they're just that way and it's just easy for them. And, maybe they grew up in a family that did that. And none of that is true. It's just that I'm okay with it being hard every day.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I feel like that could be a whole other podcast episode in and of itself, because I teach that as well. I feel like some people also in my situation, they look at me like, girl, you are crazy. You're doing what? You're building a resort. And for me, I have learned to become okay with being outside of my comfort zone. And I feel like when I'm outside of my comfort zone, my horizon is limitless, right? The world is my oyster. But learning to be comfortable with that discomfort takes time and effort and energy. And so often fear can bite us in the buns, right? It can be something that some people let that be a showstopper. So I love that you have pushed through your fear. I commend you for that. And I'm on a mission to help people overcome that on a day-to-day basis. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not always easy.
I love it. So tell me, how did you get into this world to begin with? Let's start about, talking about your journey in the short-term rental, midterm rental space. What did that look like for you early on?
Yeah, I had a friend in New York City. So it's kind of like the epicenters of the world is where things get heard of first. And he told me that he was just getting laid off and he was really burnt out and he wanted to just go travel the world. And he heard about this thing called Airbnb. And that was back in 2011. And really, I feel like Airbnb didn't become a household name till maybe like 2016 or later. So it's really early days. And he was just like, I don't know, I'm going to try it. I have this really expensive lease that I'm stuck in. And so if I could at least offset that a little bit, then I can travel. And so he thought he was going to go for a month or two. And he ended up making so much money on that apartment that he traveled an entire year. And at the end of it, he said, I made $50,000 off of my apartment. And back then, I feel like that was like $100,000 because it was like a starting tech salary. And it was a really exciting number that I'd never made in my life. I was like in college. And so it really made me perk up and go, okay, he's been talking to me about how I have to do this for so long. Let me just try it. Right. And what I love about Airbnb is that you can just try it. Most people have an extra bedroom or a basement or something that you could furnish, right? And so I had a roommate who was just leaving. She was kind of moving out. And I thought, well, it's furnished already. I have sheets and towels. Let me just make a listing. And if I hate it, I'll get a roommate. So that evolved into me getting other apartments, eventually being able to buy and co-hosting. So yeah, that was a long time ago.
That's amazing. I love that. So you started out in the world of arbitrage then. That was your original operational model, and then you moved into buying property from there.
Yeah, because I didn't have like 2 nickels to my name. I was working for a little above minimum wage at a retail shop, and I was in college at the time. And so I just thought, like, well, this could be some supplemental income. I was cleaning myself, like, it was bare bones.
Yeah. And so when did you feel like your business was starting to actually take shape and build momentum? How long did it take you to get there?
I think like these days you see people on TikTok, and this was like kind of before all that. I mean, I think we had Facebook barely, but you see people where it's just like, 0 to 10 properties in 6 months or whatever. But I had no models for that. I didn't really know anybody else but my friend who lived in a whole different state. And Boulder didn't really have the demand that New York City had. So it really did take me a while to even take it seriously and think it could be something. And it was always just this side hustle that I had. And really, I was going to go pursue this other career through college and everything. So I feel like it took me a couple of years before I was starting to see, wow, actually, this could be my career. Yeah, it's kind of funny to think about that now.
So when within that process did you get your real estate license, and why did you decide to get your real estate license?
Yeah, I think I wish that I had done it sooner. And the reason I didn't is because it felt like it didn't make sense unless you were buying 1 or 2 properties yourself in your state. And what happened to me is that I bought one property in 2014. So I think I started in 2012 actually, and it took me 2 years till I could afford to buy. Then the next properties I bought were all out of state because I couldn't afford it. And so I thought, well, if I'm investing out of state, there's really no point in having my license, which now I could have at least gotten a referral discount or something. But, in general, I was like, I don't see the point. When it came around that I realized, I should have this license, was in 2020. And it was kind of like the rule of threes for me. Sometimes the universe just shows me and then shows me and then shows me. And then I finally pay attention, right? So it was like my now husband was buying a place, and then 2 friends of mine at the same time were buying places. And I referred them to agents, but made nothing. And I realized that I left like $60,000 of commissions on the table. And so I was like, okay, maybe I should just do this thing. And I'm so glad I did. Yeah.
That's amazing. And so one of the things that I have loved watching you do is actually leveraging your experience with short-term and midterm rentals along with your newfound career as a real estate agent and also blending creative financing. Like, talk to us about how that soup all came together.
Yeah, it's funny because it's never been like a master plan. It's really just been like put one foot in front of the other, and then you kind of see, oh, this other path is opening up and I'm just going to walk this path and see what happens. So short-term rentals into midterm rentals was such an easy transition because it's already furnished, and now I'm just realizing that maybe there's a market for longer stays. For me, it was not that simple because it happened in COVID when short-term rentals completely shut off and died. So that was actually a very scary transition, but I'm glad that I made it and then realized, well, actually, there's a lot of opportunity here. Like, it wasn't just, oh, I have to do this just to survive for a minute. I was like, oh, there's a whole market that we're not tapping into. And then with being a real estate agent, I just think that maybe part of the magic of having been an investor since 2012 is that I've seen so many cycles now of real estate that I feel like I have a little bit more of a vision than some people do. And I can kind of see what's coming down the pike. And I feel that as soon as I started seeing that the interest rates were climbing up, I was like, oh, we're going to have to do something else here. And creative finance feels like it fills that gap.
And so talk to us a little bit about your preferred way that you are supporting buyers and sellers with creative financing. I've seen you talk about sub 2. Talk to us a little bit about what that is, first of all, and how you are leveraging that to support buyers and sellers.
Yeah. So subject 2 is basically just the idea that you're taking over that seller's mortgage. And the reason someone might want to do that is because they probably have a low interest rate. I think there's like 90% of mortgages are under 3%. So there's a lot out there that you could take advantage of. And these people that are selling are probably holding on to that bit of gold. And so why not take it? But the way that kind of works is that when you have a property, you'll have a lien on that property for the mortgage. So when the title company does the report for you, they'll see that lien. And if you sign off saying, hey, this lien is just staying with the property, then it really just gets transferred. Most of the time, every time there's a lien, you have to pay for it before you can transfer the home for sale. So it's really like not that complicated to have that stay on the property.
I love that. And so when you are talking with potential sellers, are you pre-negotiating that subject to style of deal and then sharing that out with your client base? Talk to us a little bit about how that takes shape in your world.
Yeah. So one thing I loved about creative finance is it taught me how to sell nationwide. And I think at first I was in this kind of idea that I think most real estate agents have, that you can only sell where you're licensed. But there's so many things trading off market and that you don't need a license for. It's really just acting as a wholesaler. But because I have a good network online through social medias and through networking and Facebook groups, I'm able to find a lot of properties and then help people turn around and sell them. And so I do pre-negotiate the terms because it's kind of like when you're doing a conventional sale, all you need is the sale number, that purchase price. But when you're selling with all of the terms and giving somebody a mortgage, essentially, they need to know what all those terms are. So we've got to pre-negotiate all that so they can see if it's worth it for them.
Okay, so you're pre-negotiating the terms. I'm curious, without diving in too far in the weeds, how are you having those conversations? I think a lot of people love the idea of buying a property subject to, or maybe negotiating a subject to type of deal, but they're worried about having that discussion with the owner. Are there any key indicators, number one, that you see that makes you think, okay, this would be a great sub 2 deal? And number 2, how are you having the discussions with the sellers so that it gives them a comfort level and helps them see the possibilities as well?
Yeah, it really depends where you're finding these sellers. So, one tip if someone was just going out to look for creative finance deals is that there's a lot of creative finance groups in Facebook. And so, if you've already know that these people are open to creative financing, that might be easier. And sometimes people in there are selling deals already. So, you can just pick up something from a wholesaler. And if people are not familiar with Facebook groups, there's a search bar at the top. And so, you can search your state or your city and you'd be surprised to see how many people have already posted things there. And then if you see repeat offenders, you've got like wholesalers that are selling a lot in Charlotte, for example, then you'd reach out to that guy and get on his list, right? So that's an easy way to go about it. Another easy way is using anything like a homes.com or, Zillow, and you can use the search there to find things that have like seller financing and the keywords. Seller financing is kind of the lowest hanging fruit. Most people know what that is, that or owner financing. And so from there, those people may be more open to conversation that could include subject to. So I think those are a little bit easier than just calling any house that's listed.
Gotcha. Okay. And so
I do a lot of cold calling.
I was going to say, we used to call that dialing for dollars, baby. So when you're having those dialing for dollars moments and you get a hold of a seller who you already know could be open to some sort of creative scenario, how are you having the discussion and providing some sort of comfort level with them? Because essentially that mortgage is still in their name, right? And is subject to deal. So how do you bridge that gap?
Yeah, I think it's really listening to the things that are problematic for them. A lot of times people are frustrated because they can't get the price that they want. And if it's been sitting, they may have gotten a bunch of lowball offers from cash buyers. Cash buyers generally need to buy something at like 60 cents on the dollar. And so right away with subject to or creative financing, you can usually give them their full price. And that makes them feel more at ease and they're usually pretty happy about that. Sometimes you can even give them more than that. So that can be something that a lot of people are stuck on. Some of the other things are that you can have a balloon date. And so you don't have to take over their mortgage for the next 20 years and essentially be tied to them. You could just do it for 5 years or even 3 years. And that really gives you the ability to just wait out the interest rates because we don't really think that they're going to be high like they are today forever. A lot of mortgage companies are predicting that it's going to be going down over the next couple of years. So if you can just kind of buy some time, that might help you too.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that balloon date. Okay. Let's dive into that a little bit. If someone purchases a property subject to the existing mortgage, and let's say there's a balloon date 3 years from now.
Yeah.
What actually happens at that balloon if they want to go and then get their own mortgage for the property that they already own, right? Because essentially they have to pay off, they have to give a lump sum to that seller. How do you recommend that people go about tackling that balloon payment?
Yeah, so I usually like people to get a 5-year balloon, but sometimes that's hard to negotiate. Most of the times that's pretty standard. And the reason I like that is because at the end, once you're in that kind of last year of the balloon, you're not going to wait till the day it expires. You need to make an exit plan. So you got to make sure you even qualify for a loan and like, what are the options out there, right? So it's nice to give yourself more time because if it's a 3-year balloon at 2 years, you're already needing to make a plan. So I don't love that right out of the gate. What happens at the balloon date? Usually people refinance. So you do a cash out refinance. If you have equity, you need to pay back. Otherwise, you just do a refinance into your own loan. Yeah.
Awesome. And they can still do that refinance even because they own the property, even though that the existing mortgage is in someone else's name.
Yeah. And they would just pay off that mortgage.
Gotcha. Love it. So many fun nitty gritty details we're talking through. So I appreciate you hanging in there with me. I'm curious to get your thoughts on how you feel like your expertise in short-term and midterm rentals, your expertise in creative financing has set you apart as a real estate agent. The reason why I ask that, and you may have heard me say this before, I am a licensed agent myself, and I find that there are so many real estate agents that simply don't understand real estate investing, and they really should if they want to be the best servant for their clients. Since you do understand real estate investing, how have you seen that play to your advantage?
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, it's great because I can provide a unique experience and understand the tax implications and all the different exit strategies and the different ways you can rent a property. So I think that gives people a lot of options. And there are a lot of buyers out there that don't necessarily need that, right? So I tend to work with mostly investors for that reason.
I love it. I'm curious, if someone is listening and saying, gosh, well, I've never thought about the importance of my real estate agent being investor friendly or an experienced investor. What types of questions would you recommend that someone ask their agent to help them kind of vet, are they going to be a right fit for me if I'm looking for an agent that understands investments?
I mean, I think that's a great question. The main thing is just whatever strategy you're excited about, make sure they have that direct experience, right? If you're looking for midterm rentals, that's going to be a smaller pool, but make sure they either own or operate them. And so they can really tell you, okay, this area has this good demand and why or why not you want to be here. Maybe this is a path of progress. If you're talking to a lot of agents, they may not even have bought a home in their life. Like, I think people don't realize that. And the amount of hours that we do, we're not really trained on how to buy a house. It's really just some legalities around,
How to not get sued. That's
kind of, and like what a title company does and what a legal description is. I mean, it's really silly, the education that we get, quote unquote. So I think you want somebody who knows how to do what you're doing. Find a mentor in your agent.
Yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. If someone is exploring creative finance for the first time, would you recommend that they start out with a deal subject to, or would you recommend they leverage a different creative acquisition strategy to dip their toe in the waters?
Yeah, I'd say subject to and seller finance are probably the best ones as a buyer. So there's kind of like a little spectrum of, who it's better for. Those are better for the buyer. Then you've got like contract for deed that might just be something that's a little more middle ground. Then there's also rent to own or lease option, and that's actually better for the seller than the buyer. So kind of figuring out, where am I and what are the advantages of each of them. And there's some great YouTube videos on that online too, where they can reach out.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Such good information, Zeona. I'm curious, from your perspective, what's next? So knowing you're always pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. I know obviously you have a lot on your plate right now, but what do you feel like is next for you? What do you envision for your future?
Yeah, I might write another book. I mean, I really loved that experience, and it's such a cool way to touch a lot of lives. So that's been just kind of in my mind a little bit. And then I'm personally, as an investor now, over 10 years and doing lots of rentals and management, kind of wanting to move into something truly passive. And I think there's this sort of misconception that when you are getting into rental properties or real estate, it's passive. Most of it's not a reality. And short-term rentals especially is kind of that most active rental that you can have. So I've really been in a very active role. So now I'm learning a lot more about syndications and funds and trying to be in that truly passive investor seat. But it requires a lot of studying and learning how to vet and understanding different asset classes. So again, I'm getting my PhD in real estate.
Girl, I totally feel you. So I am in the midst right now of putting together the finishing touches on an offer memorandum where I'm actually in the active role. I'm the general partner, but just learning that whole sphere. I mean, I have been working on this resort that I am developing for about a year now. And we're just, now to the point where we're able to move the needle, shall we say, and start that capital raise. But to your point, there is a huge learning curve when you look to do something new. And I think wherever you are on the spectrum as a listener, wherever you are, it's important to get education. I spent a lot of money for me personally on getting my education on the land development side, on the equity and capital raising side of putting together a hotel and a resort. Like that is not something that you just fly by the seat of your pants. And I think you bring up a great point that, being a constant learner is definitely something that plays to your advantage over time.
Yeah. I think I also want to like dabble in fundraising a bit because there's been some cool partnerships that I've noticed since getting into the syndications world. So I'll have to pick your brain about it. But I think it's very exciting, and it's a fun way to kind of invest alongside people, bring people into your journey and kind of all go together towards a goal. It's exciting.
So fun. So fun. What do you think the topic of your next book will be? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I think this next one would be a more how-to on creative finance. I've been frustrated in my time wanting to learn it, at the forefront, and there wasn't a lot of info out there. I felt like there were lots of YouTube videos and things, but they were just kind of a snippet of one little idea. But to find something that's really laid out as a step-by-step so someone can feel really confident going out and doing it doesn't seem to exist. There's a lot of conceptual high level stuff. So I think that would be great. I would love to do that.
I love it. Okay, girl, I'm going to say I need a date when that book is coming out, because you are right. That is a huge gap in the market. You totally need to write that.
Yeah, it's funny because my last book was published through Bigger Pockets. And so it was so easy. I mean, writing a book is scary and hard. So, that is one thing. But they have this whole team that takes you through the whole thing. They've got their editors and their book designers, and, everything's being market tested. I think this time I would self-publish, and again, it's the terrifying territory, right? It's like, oh my gosh, how do I even market a book? What do I do? Yeah,
I know. So I'm about halfway done with my book. So I started writing a book. I'm about halfway done as of the day that we're recording this. And it's so funny that just getting to that halfway mark, I'm like, sweet Jesus, I've made it halfway through. Like, this is amazing. But it is such an incredible experience. And I do not consider myself a writer, And so for me, it's definitely been a little time consuming on the front end. I feel like I'm starting about halfway through to get in a groove, like, oh, okay, this is how we do this. But there's a song about that somehow, but so fun. Well, I cannot wait to see when that book comes out. So
I love that you're doing it. I mean, I think it's so important for people to kind of understand that, because I think there can be a book inside everyone, and there's so many ideas that we can share and stories that people can learn from. And if you're having questions about it or doubts, like we all do, from every day, you have tons of demons coming in and mind chatter of not being good enough, and who would even want to read this, and who are you to do that? And oh my gosh. So I think people, if they're wanting to do it, I would encourage them to try, because even with that, it's worth doing.
Yeah. Amen. All right. I want to move into what I like to call the lightning round. Okay. I am going to ask you some questions. I'm going to ask you to answer with the very first thing that comes to mind. First question is, where is your favorite place to vacation?
I would say Maui, and it's where I grew up, and I just love going back and kind of visiting something that feels like home, so familiar, but not mine anymore. Yeah.
Girl, okay, I did not know that you grew up in Maui. And second of all, why on earth would you ever move away?
I mean, it's a valid question, but Maui is a very slow, small town kind of mentality,
Yeah.
and it just didn't work with my entrepreneur. I need to like spread my
Yeah.
wings and do wild things.
That's amazing. I mean, do you still have family there?
I do, yeah. So we're there 6 to 8 weeks a year. So we get lots of Maui time, which is great.
Well, next time you go and you need a friend to tag along, I'm going to volunteer myself. Okay.
Okay,
Just so you
great.
know.
I'll let you know. Now it's going to be up to you. See if you come.
All right. What's one place you've never been that you want to visit?
I want to go to Botswana. It sounds kind of random, but I remember a friend of mine who was doing AIDS work and just saying that there's such an untouched beauty with all the wildlife and places that you
Mm,
can stay where you're like on the edge of a riverbed and you can hear them all in the night. And I just feel like we don't experience animals
mhm.
anymore. So I'm
Isn't that
curious about
funny?
that.
So this is totally not Botswana, but yesterday I took a walk in my neighborhood
In Ohio?
in
Okay,
Ohio.
great.
Okay.
Great, great,
But,
great.
but you mentioned you
Um,
don't really hear animals, but I was just listening to the birds and
mhm.
it actually resonated with me like, wow, I don't ever just take a minute and just listen to the
Mm.
birds outside. Like they're beautiful. And then it
Yeah.
makes me wonder, like, what are they saying? What are they, are they, having girl talk? Like, what are these birds saying to each other? But it's so funny that you mentioned, being on the edge of a riverbed and hearing wild animals in Botswana. I think I'd be scared out of my bejeebies.
Okay. I mean, I think it's it's more of a curated experience. You're not just like necessarily in a tent. I think you would be more safe than
Okay.
that.
All right. Well, let me know. I am not volunteering to go on that trip, just so you know.
Great.
All right. What's one thing you know now that you wished you knew when you were starting out in the world of short-term or midterm rentals?
Wow. The thing that's coming to me, I think there's probably a million of them, but it's just that understanding that failures are only a snapshot of where you stop. Right?
Mm,
Because there's been lots of times that I had a house or tried a thing and then I thought it was a failure. But then by the time I actually sold the house, it transformed into something that was even better than I could have imagined. And I was
mhm,
able to take those funds and roll it into another property. And now the story is even better and better. So I think before you're too hard on yourself, kind of go like, where am I in this life cycle? Is it over
mhm,
yet?
mhm. Wow, that's amazing. Amazing. Great advice. Speaking of advice, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Wow, that's a toughie. I think to be gentle with myself. I tend to be someone who has a lot of criticism, like the negative self talk, and just kind of trying to ignore that and keep going. And when in doubt and when in struggle, just push on. So just one
Mhm,
foot in front of the other.
mhm. I think that that's a really important thing to point out because I I think a lot of people put others on a pedestal and
Mm,
forgive me, I don't want to downgrade all of your accomplishments, but what I want to say is we are talking with Zeona McIntyre, a published author, a very successful national figure, and even she struggles with negative self-talk. We all
mhm.
struggle with it, and it gives me goosebumps talking about that because I think a lot of people have this facade in their mind like, oh, she's perfect, or she knows exactly what she's doing all the time, or she never struggles with anything. And that's
Yeah.
just not true. We all struggle with things. And I love that you're just pushing through it
Every day. But
every
the birds are singing, the sun is out.
day.
Keep going.
What are those birds saying to each other? No. All right. What is one thing and or person that you're grateful for today?
Hmm. I'm grateful for this conversation. I feel like it's giving me an opportunity to just reflect and
Oh,
kind of spend some time with myself and feel my heart. So thank you, Stacey. I feel like this is
oh
a
my
cool
gosh.
opportunity.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's my pleasure.
Yeah.
So, Zeona, if folks want to learn more about you, if they want to get plugged into your awesome email list and
Yeah.
potentially, find out how you can support them, what is the best place for people to find you online?
Yeah, my website, ZeonaMcIntyre.com, and Instagram is probably where I'm the most active. I do a lot on Facebook too. So just searching Zeona McIntyre. Yeah.
Love it. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, anytime.